Good afternoon, everyone. It's so great to see everybody here for the panel this afternoon. My name is Tom Bridge. I'm going to be your moderator today. We've got some fantastic guests. I'm going to do quick introductions, and then we're going to dive right into the conversation. There are a fair number of questions that are in the Q&A. Thank you all for submitting some really great questions. Feel free to keep those coming as we start talking today. We'll do our best to get through as many as we can. Hold on one moment, Mr. Daw. Understood. I saw the email. Thank you. So we have some fantastic panelists with us today, starting with, to your left, Jack Hollister, the Mac lead for Jigsaw 24. Jack, say hello.
Hello, everyone.
Wonderful. Rebecca Latimer, the secretary of the Mac Admins Foundation. Hello, Rebecca.
Hello.
And Stephen Quirk, a Mac Wrangler, which is exciting, and I do not see you in a cowboy hat. Stephen Quirk.
It's very nice to be here. Thanks, Tom.
Yeah, thank you so much for being here. Ulrich O.B. Hansen, thank you so much for joining us today as well.
You're welcome.
And Graham Gilbert. So, Graham, I don't think, do you need an introduction? Yes, you do. Graham, you were the, senior lead for Airbnb?
Yes, although today I'm just me, so I do have to say that my views are my own, do not necessarily reflected by those of my employer.
All right. Fantastic. Disclaimers all out of the way. We've got some fantastic topics to talk about. Unfortunately, for those of you who counted the panelists as 6 earlier, we are at 5. Unfortunately, Holly Foxcroft had a family emergency that she needed to attend to. We hope that everything is okay. So what a great first 2 days of this conference, right? Like, we've had some incredible talks out there. Congrats to everyone who has been delivering their talks. We've all learned so much this week, and of course, I'm going to want to start by talking a little bit about AI, because I feel like it's an important subject that we hear a lot about, whether or not we want to. It's also not going away anytime soon. So from each of you, I want to ask you one of 2 questions, and I'll let you choose which to answer, because I feel like that's a fun way to do a panel. What's something that AI helped you build for yourself or your team that has been worth the trouble? Or what's something AI can't do yet that you'd love to have it do? And Jack, I'll start with you.
I'll answer the first one. So for me, I've been using it as my, I just like shout into the void, voice capture everything. So it's just like this big wall of just everything that's in my brain with whatever I'm trying to build or do. And I just use it as if I've got a PA that's like barely hanging on as I'm just like rambling on and on. And then I go back and go, please summarize this. What is it that I'm actually trying to do? And then I've been using it to just turn the garbage that's in here to something that's useful to other people or like colleagues that I'm working with. So yeah, I've been trying to use it as a bit of a PA just to make my brain work better.
Awesome. Becca, how about you?
Yeah, honestly, pretty similar. I use it a lot for communication. I have a hard time, like when I write an email, getting the tone exactly right and getting the wording of things right. And so I'll just kind of brain dump exactly what I want to say, and I'm like, make me sound smarter.
And Stephen, how about you?
So, there was that Douglas Adams quote about any technology that's invented after you're 35 is mysterious and wrong or whatever. Luckily, I'm 34 and I'm not 34 and a half. So I find the whole sort of AI thing really sort of, I'm very Luddite about it, and I have sort of colleagues. But I've got colleagues who are much smarter than me who are like dragging me, kicking and screaming, and saying, no, you should be using this. So. But my real world example is I've recently been sort of dipping my toes into the world of OS Query. But unfortunately for me, I had an unpleasant interaction with OS Query, SQL, at a young age, and it's left me terrified of all things SQL. And so I can ask Google Gemini to help me with that. So between debugging logs or saying, hey, Gemini, how would I write a thing about this? That's been like a real world example where it's actually helped. And that actually inspired by Graham. There was something in the OS Query channel, and you go, ask ChatGPT, it'll write SQL for you. But then the only thing that's weird is then, when Gemini fibs and tells you about a table that doesn't exist, and you go to the OS Query docs and go, there is no such table. And then you say, hey, Gemini, and then Gemini goes, yeah, you got me, I was making it up. Which doesn't help with my degree of Ludditiness. But I'm working on it.
Yeah. And Ulrich, this is such a complicated topic, right? And I feel like as a trainer, you may have a very different approach to this. Tell me a little bit more from your perspective.
Yeah, I think from a brainstorming perspective, it's very powerful. because your mind tends to get stuck in the same ways. And especially if you deliver training, you have this curse of knowledge that you know the answer. So how does that look from the point of view of someone who doesn't know the answer? So I've been using it to kind of come up often with analogies. Like if you need to explain a really complicated technical term to someone who's hearing it for the first time, I love using analogies. That means your brain has somewhere to store it next to something they know. But sometimes coming up with those analogies can be a little bit challenging. And then ChatGPT is a great tool. Just go, give me an analogy for the pipe, and it comes up with these 3 great analogies. I'm a huge fan of cooking, so several stations in a professional kitchen where one station takes the carrots in and peels it off and sends it off to the next station that juliennes the carrots. So that's my pipe analogy now, and I've used a couple of those. Pretty good for that.
Nice. And Graham?
I guess there's 2 things, like the duality of my role. I'm a manager and an engineer. So first off, Copilot is fantastic. Like, use that for writing unit tests. If you're in a sufficiently large code base, it will generally guess what you need to do. So I really like that. And we have an AI chatbot at work. And I was asked, who is eligible for promotion recently? And I was like, okay, cool. I've got to go into the HR system. I've got to trawl through this thing. It'll take me forever. And then I've got to go and look at our policy on time in role and do all the math there. And that probably take me about an hour. I could ask the AI chatbot, who on my team is eligible for promotion? And it just told me. Like, it's great. So I think using it as glorified search at this point. So I feel like I'm underutilizing it, but
Awesome.
maybe it's because I don't trust it like Steve doesn't.
Well, and I think that's where I'm running into trouble is the trust issues, right? Because I feel like you only have to have it hallucinate at you once in a way that you can obviously tell that this is not someone who is. I mean, it's a little. I love my son dearly, but I ask him a question. Hey, how did your homework go today? And he may hallucinate the answer. Oh, we didn't have any of that today. No big deal. But by the same token, I really should say Charlie's really good at his schoolwork. I am not trying to slander my own child, but that's the same kind of experience that I've had a few times with, hey, could you give me a permissions dictionary a P list for for example, the restrictions payload, and it's going to find restrictions that don't exist. And that's a little terrifying because you might roll that out to your fleet and think that you've done your job, only there are keys in there that maybe don't exist. So that's a bit of an adventure, right? I think that you have to balance it with your own knowledge. One of the questions from the audience is, what is the future for Mac management in the AI era? How do you think that AI is going to affect how we manage our devices? Yeah?
Well, I think we're already seeing many of the major MDMs implement some form of AI helping you achieve a task. And then I guess it comes down to that trust and AI continuously evolving, because I'm still at the point where I'll ask AI to build me a dynamic group or a smart group, and it does it. But then right now, I'm going to be at that point where I go in and check it manually. So when is that going to shift? And are we then going to end up with people that are not capable of checking it? That's the downside of that, because we think, oh, we don't need to educate our people anymore because they can just get AI to do it. But what about the checking? And there's a point of tipping that, I think, which I don't know when comes.
I think maybe it's going to be helping us pull the data in from all of the tools that we use, because obviously MDM just around managing the device. So we think about what the identity engine's doing, what we're doing with our application stack, what vulnerabilities there are. I think the future is that will be our way of actually talking to our tech stack rather than having to hop across. At least that's what I hope the road lays.
I was going to say, we get that login fatigue after, you've got to log into every session every hour. It'd be nice to have something more central that you could talk to on a more regular basis that would let you do some of those management tasks. So I can hear that. Becca.
I actually think that our jobs are probably some of the safest in terms of AI, because I think that when it comes down to it with troubleshooting, you really still do need that human element. And I think that a lot of other jobs, like developer jobs and things like that, you can do a lot more with AI. But I think that like as Mac admins, there's so many complex systems that we have to manage that I think that you really do at some point need a human to actually be in there looking at it, figuring things out, figuring out how things talk to each other and work with each other. I think that it's just a little bit too complex at this point anyway for AI.
I mean, for the people here, I think we're all okay, but I worry about the pipeline coming in because AI is going to replace most tier 1 help desks. Like,
Yeah.
I think so.
Yeah.
Well, and that's where I got my start, was as a tier 1 help desk
Yep,
person.
same.
I think, who here in the room got their start as help desk overall? That is most of the hands in this room. And so if there's no pipeline through that, how do we preserve the career path that exists? Where do we find other people to come into the career path, if not through the help desk? And that's a challenge. Steve?
But then, you know, some of the ways in which sort of AI gets presented, though, is as an augmentation tool. So the idea, for example, I remember this, I mean, this was sort of pre-AI, things like IBM's Watson, the idea you have an aging population, you know, you haven't got enough doctors, but you can give, you know, a nurse practitioner an IBM Watson, I'm not sponsored, you know, like an LLM that can help sort of supercharge that, you know, I'm not a doctor, but I know all this stuff because it can help me. And so maybe the point is you go straight to second line, right? Because you haven't had to do, although now you can still do useful skills Becca's talking about. But, you know, there's this idea that you don't have to start with password reset. You can jump into something else because, I don't know. That's strangely optimistic for me.
I think it's okay to be a little optimistic about this technology set. You're balancing the optimism and the pessimism of any new technology. When I did my master's, I did a history of technology. And at every historical implementation point, I mean, there was a time when we thought the telephone would cause the erosion of social society because you wouldn't see your friends, you'd call them. And so there was a worry of a social erosion that happened just because we could call each other. Whereas instead
we just stare at our phones. So we don't have to talk to each other. So, I mean, maybe that one came true.
Yeah, I mean, it's entirely possible that, you know, there is both positive and negative inference for a lot of these new technology implementation cycles. So I think that's a very reasonable perspective to have, is being both very pro while also recognizing that the cons are present and come at the cost of social cost. So. Allowing me to pivot into career conversations real quick, since we just talked about a little bit of a career conversation. You know, at this point in your careers, and I think it's fair to say that we've all seen some things at this point. Whether we're talking about, you know, acknowledging trauma, we've seen some stuff, or, you know, an acknowledgement of your accomplishments. Based on either context, what's something you wish you knew more about earlier in your career? And I'll start with Graham on this one.
Fun story. Like very early in my career, we were at the company Christmas party. I was the only IT person, and someone comes up to my now wife, then girlfriend, said, "Oh, Graham's great. You know, he works so hard. He's great. All these things." And yeah, my wife goes, "Yeah, I'm an IT widow. Like I never see him." So I think something I wish I'd learned a bit quicker is we're not saving lives, unless you actually are. When I was consulting, I had a customer who did political evacuations. So you think like former special forces people, they get you out of war zones, that kind of stuff. So, but they also had network homes on a PowerMac G5 long after a PowerMac G5 should not be in service. So if this one box went down, like literally people could die. It was terrifying.
Ulrich?
Yeah, I guess being here, I would probably tell my younger self to start going to Mac conferences earlier in my career. Because I've only been going the past 3 years, and just getting that network, meeting your peers, and hooking up with people, making connections, that's really led down a lot of new paths that probably would have changed my career earlier on in many ways.
Stephen?
I mean, similar but different. I guess one of the things that IT people do, like, I think there's a degree of introversion, he says, sitting on the stage in front of a group of people. But there is, and you know, and you fix problems with the computer, and you don't. I think working on that network piece, so getting out and meeting other people, meetups, Slack channels. I mean, the conferences are really challenging because I think, I know that you're doing great work with sort of sponsorships and stuff, but ultimately they're expensive and not everyone can go. So things like the Slack have been really, really interesting. I mean, from my perspective, I sort of stumbled across the IRC channel from back in the day. Okay, get off my lawn, I stumbled across the IRC channel. In fact, hit the story. So I bumped into Graham at a meetup in London, which I think AMSIS had organised back in the day. So this is a long time ago. And then because I met Graham, I found Graham's blog. On Graham's blog, he wrote about an IRC bouncer, so you had an EC2 instance in AWS, you wouldn't miss messages when it was offline, because that's how IRC worked. And I'd missed IRC, actually. I missed that whole point. I was on dial-up. It wasn't a thing I did, despite being this old. And I found the IRC channel, and that was huge. That was really eye-opening. So it's about that network, about being more connected and less introverted.
Mm-hmm. Becca?
Yeah, kind of in a similar vein, I would say don't be afraid to ask questions, because I feel like really early on in your career, you tend to think like you're supposed to know everything, and asking questions is like a weakness. And especially if you come from like the Windows IT world where people tend to be a little less friendly. You ask a question in the Windows Discord and everyone just jumps down your throat. You should know this already. In the Apple world, it's a lot friendlier and nicer. And so I think that would be a big thing is if you don't know something, reach out, ask somebody. Don't be afraid to like send a message to somebody that, wrote a blog post that, you found really interesting, but you have a question about. Like, reach out to that person, talk to them. Get engaged with people more. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Jack?
I don't know. For me, I think it's probably knowing we spend so much time like focusing on Apple. That's like our expertise, and like we all chose to go down this like niche route because we could have went anywhere in IT, and because we spend so much time doing that, I think sometimes you can get imposter syndrome. You think, do I actually know what I'm talking about? And I had a point where I was going in. I'd done all like my JAMP certs, and I was going into one of the big banks and presenting to them. They'd never seen Macs really in business to them. They were just like that annoying device that creative people use. This is a bank, we do proper things and wear suits and stuff. And I remember going in and being this, at the time I was like bleach blonde hair, like 23-year-old, just be like, hi, I'm going to talk to you about shiny Macs and how we're going to make them work in your bank. And I don't know, there was almost a little bit of fear of, well, maybe I don't know what I'm talking about. I don't know, I think sometimes just owning the fact is like, hey, no, actually, like I double down, like I'm really passionate about this, and like just own the fact that we all love this tech, and like, we go into a room and just, I don't know, try and live and breathe that passion out in the workplace as well.
So thinking about your expertise and the expertise of the teams that you work with now, we all know that there are blind spots out there in terms of, hey, there's this technology that's not well understood within your organization, or there's a skill that's missing sometimes that maybe needs more training than others, or there are places where you feel like your team might have a need that it doesn't have. And when you think about those kind of blind spots with the community that we're in, what do you think is the most common blind spot on your team? And how do you think we should fix that as a community, building a pipeline for new people to enter the market?
That's a good question.
That's a big, long question for me to say, essentially, where are we weakest as a community in terms of knowledge and application? Because I think that, coming at it from the Apple perspective, we're really strong on security and privacy applications. We probably have a good understanding of what MDMs can and can't do. But is there good knowledge around what IDPs do and don't do? Is there good knowledge? Are there other spots where you think that there's a hole in the gap? Jack?
I think, and like this year's MacAd, it's a great example of it, is like the adjacent talks that aren't necessarily around like our core tech, Zensary that was talking around sort of like mindfulness, and Holly's talk around just like the cybersecurity side. It's just like all this is adjacent to the tech that we spend all day working with, and I found like those two talks like the most like engaging for me, because I was like, wow, I never thought about like it from this point of view. So I don't know, maybe it's just that widening, because we all have that same culture of like the Apple way, but there's so much cool stuff that happens alongside, and I think maybe bringing that in widens the audience, also extends the scope of the people that can be a part of it as well.
I think not necessarily in the Mac admin community, but in the greater IT community, there is a thought that Mac and Windows are very, very different, and you have to be in one camp or the other. So if you're a Windows person, you're just a Windows person, and you're not going to deal with the Macs at all. And if you're the Mac person, you don't understand anything about Windows. And really, the truth is that, you know, at the underlying core, whether you're installing an application on Windows through Intune or you're doing it on a Mac through Jamf, the same concepts are still there and the same best practices are still there. So you actually really easily can move from one to the other as long as you understand the underlying concepts. So I think that that's kind of a blind spot that a lot of people have.
Okay. Because my blind spot is so big, I can't actually think what it is. Because what I think is really interesting about the Mac community, though, is that lazy stereotypes. There's like a sense that if you're with a Mac, you're more likely to be using, you know, like a cloud identity service and SaaS apps and stuff. Like the idea of you having a whole fleet of Macs, but they're all bound to an AD box that's in a cupboard, and that's it's not impossible. Graham used to work with that person, right? But it's pretty unlikely. And so what I find is actually the Slack's an incredible, you know, resource for that, because it's like, oh, well, who's using this SaaS tool or that SaaS tool, you know? In fact, recently we've been looking at products, and for me it was kind of a red flag that one of the products that we've been trialing, they don't have a Slack channel. Why? How can a product that's supposed to be as wonderful as it is, and I'm sure that it is, but how am I supposed to sort of grump about it with other people using it? So my blind spot is I have a blind spot and I don't know about. I mean, or it's maybe back to the Windows thing a little bit too, that I think you do feel that when you want to ask a Windows question, I know there's a Windows channel, but that's the gap. Like that you do that Windows thing and you don't have anyone to ask. Maybe I should ask Gemini how the hell CSPs work. That's what I should do.
Tie it all together.
CSPs work only some of the time for some of the keys, and then the rest of them, it's kind of just fire and hope.
Is it a binary?
I mean, it's a lot like an MDM.
Is it XML? Is it a string? Who knows? Anyway.
All right.
So this is going to be a little more local, and then people can confirm or deny whether it's true everywhere else. And in Denmark, the Mac community has a blind spot that is, there is no IT education that is available in the educational system that touches Mac at all. Which means that one thing is that we may risk not having a pipeline because of AI. In Denmark, at least, we risk not having a pipeline because no education, no school or college is kind of pushing Mac at all. So we are left to people who are trained in Windows, finding Mac and curiously being drawn to it. And there are a few of them, but not many. Mm-hmm. And right now it's becoming a huge challenge because Mac is growing in the enterprise in Denmark, but all the big companies are holding back because they don't have the IT department to support it. Yeah.
Graham?
Well, I'm glad I'm last, because I've been spending this whole time trying to think of
Me too.
So, I mean, if you'd asked me a couple of years ago, I'd say, oh, it's software engineering skills, because like, when you're able to connect products together, you know, using APIs, what have you, like that makes them really powerful. But you know, AI's, I won't say it's killed it, but it's definitely on its way, where you can ask ChatGPT to say, I want to do this, and it might give you something good, it might not. So what do I think our big skill gap is? Honestly, is knowing how MDM actually works. Like if the protocol is interesting and it has its quirks, and I think a lot of people's frustrations with the various products that they have would be alleviated if they understood how MDM worked. And that's
Although I have actually just sort of a more different blind spot, and that's I think And I think this is going away a bit, though, but I think there is certainly a sense of Mac being that sort of this other platform. So if you're talking about that pipeline again, if let's say you're a junior IT and you want to learn about IT, like you can grab, a cheap PC from junkyard, almost. You can install Microsoft products and they'll run for 90 days without a license key and all that sort of stuff. And you can go, you can learn loads. You put Linux, you do all of these things on really cheap, on Raspberry Pis. But if you want to learn Mac, there's a barrier there. And Apple, the low-end product's called an iPad. What? The new Mac Mini is stellar, but 600 quid is a lot of money to somebody who's just starting out, and that's a pretty high barrier to entry. I'm thinking about the first time I went to sort of Maxis admin, which is a very long time ago, and they're all the senior admins, all the sort of people who've been around, because the juniors don't get to touch the Mac. That's less now because there's more Macs around, but there's definitely that there is a barrier to entry in doing Mac stuff. I bought my first Mac because my org wasn't going to buy me one. I wanted to learn Mac. I kind of fancied a laptop anyway. I was getting paid. It was very exciting. But I bought a Mac to learn Mac, which is kind of why I'm here. But yeah, that.
Mm-hmm. So as we return to our jobs on Monday, and I was going to say, Monday will be 3 weeks from Worldwide Developers Conference 2025, which is, that's time to get excited, right? It's also time to dread. I've been in both camps as recently as November. And, I think that one of the things I'm curious about is what's on your wish list, and what do you think we're going to get out of WWDC this year? So I feel like those are two very different things. Give me your optimistic view or give me your pessimistic view, or maybe give me some of each. So, and Graham, I'm going to go right to you on this one.
Oh, I want Intel machines to be gone. I want Mac OS 16 to be Apple Silicon only. Then I can finally get rid of those stinky Intel machines. What do I think I'm going to get? Some AI stuff that we won't get management controls for until the last minute.
Hopefully they've learned from last year's mistakes.
You're new to this, right?
It's nice to dream, right?
Yeah.
I was going to say, we have to keep that level of optimism going. All right?
Yeah, this is a difficult one for me because part of watching Dub is getting surprised and delighted for me. Mm-hmm. And I tend to completely stay away from rumor blogs, anything like that in the weeks leading up to, just leaving my mind open, because I find so easily if you read something, you start expecting something, and then no matter what, you get disappointed. And you're not focused on what you're getting, you're focused on what you didn't get.
Right.
So I'm just hoping for improvements, user experience, rumors. Yeah, I did see them, of course. New UI. It's about time, since we left skeuomorphism, if that's the word. So other than that, I don't have any big. I'm waiting to be surprised.
All right. I like that. I was going to say, keep that beginner's mindset, right? I was going to say, I think that's an important process, right? To come into something as if it were new to you entirely.
I often find myself, the older I get, the more grumpy I get, and you focus on the things that aren't just you think they should be, and that's never going to lead you anywhere positive. And then when you meet new people with that attitude, you're not bringing them to Mac then. So.
Yep. Stephen, how about you?
So, I think the clue with Dub is the developer side. Realistically, it's a week of updates for WatchKit. What's that? And a bunch of other things I'm never going to use. I'm going to get 2.5 videos that will apply, and I'll watch them a few times. Hopefully Cyrus will do something again, because I'm a big fan of Cyrus Debu's presenting stuff. But also with Apple, how do I phrase it? How do I put this nicely? You get what you're given. That's broadly how it works. Could you turn this feature on or off? So it's never. I'm not rubbing my hands together going, ooh, Dub DC time. That said, on the wish list, I think I mentioned this to you earlier, Tom. I think the return to set once.
Oh, yeah.
The MCX set once, often, always. Mm-hmm. Because one of the sort of struggles, and I think you covered it in your session today, this idea that the restrictions are annoying because you have to make a choice. Whereas if you can nudge the user, hey, I'd like this, but you can always turn it off, that'd be great, but you can't do that. I get the impression that declarative should allow more of that sort of stuff if I'm understanding it properly. So then the other thing I'd like is more clarity around the declarative roadmap. Like, really, when is it coming? What's it going to be doing? But again, I'm not allowed a roadmap because it's Apple, so I'll be surprised.
Yes. I was going to say, we get surprised and delighted with new MDM technology as a vendor, or, at least that was my experience as a vendor, was that, we found out when everybody else did what we had to do that year. And of course, that roadmap spot is something you have to leave a big empty gap for, whether you're Jamf, Kanji, Jump Cloud, or et cetera. There's no advance knowing. And I was going to say, if that's my wish list, would be reading people in a little bit earlier so that you can prepare your roadmap for the future, instead of just having to say, I'm carving you out 2 quarters and we'll do what we can, and then maybe not getting anything out.
But isn't that what DubDub is? It's for the developers, and the MDM developers are developers as well.
2 quarters is insufficient time.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, and that's really what it comes down to, is that, when you're a PM setting a roadmap, I guarantee you that all of the PMs out there have question marks in Q3 and Q4, and they don't know what the value story is that goes there. They don't know how to tell that story with their product until they actually get working code, which they won't get in the first beta. And in a lot of stories that we've seen over the last couple of years, features come in January or March that were teased in June and said may show up sometime between October. It's really hard to build against that software type pipeline, even if you have dedicated devs for those particular platforms. And so that's one thing where I think Apple could do a better job at being a good developer partner with the people who make the enterprise platforms here. Make me sign whatever you need me to sign, but let's give the MDM vendors a little bit more advance notice so that they can be on time. Because I mean, the demand is there. I mean, who here was really excited? I mean, was demanding immediate access to Apple Intelligence restrictions payloads? Everybody was. That was the most common feature request in my backlog as soon as they were announced. Was I need a way to control this, and so then we had to submit feedback and try and make that go, and that was its own adventure. Some of which was good and some of which was not. But I think that if I were to make a wish, that would be my wish. Becca, how about you?
Yeah, I mean, that's similar to what I was going to say, which is, having a roadmap and also having Apple have better communication with developers about things that are going to be deprecated. So, I mean, I'm sure everybody remembers, last year when this happened, and this year it seems to be happening again with pasting things. I don't know if anybody has played around with all the beta features where all the applications need access to paste things, to copy and paste, just like on iOS. Like if you open up Slack, it'll say Slack wants to access the clipboard. And that's because of a deprecated API endpoint that Apple's decided that they don't need anymore, but they're relying on us to tell developers that this is a bad user experience. So I guess that would be my wish list, is Apple actually communicating with the developers themselves and not making us be the go-between between that. But what I think we'll get at WWDC is more emojis.
Oh, well, excellent. I mean, one can hope. So, Jack, how about you?
I don't know, mine's a little bit sort of outside of work. I would just love to have a HomePod that I could speak to and not have a fight with. I just want the radio to play while I'm cooking, and now it's trying to give me the weather in Australia, and I'm like in Southend. Why doesn't it know where it is? And then the nice calm kitchen experience is just me just throwing a HomePod in here.
I will say, I am looking forward to a HomePod that works.
Maybe the HomePod Ultra. That could be
Max Ultra.
Yeah, a HomePod Ultra Max would be
it's just like a
pretty
massive
awesome
bouncy ball just rolling around the house.
Yep, I think that's a safe bet. I honestly do think that we're due a revision there, and it's past time in a lot of ways. I'm just hoping for services like that work. My wife and I maintain a grocery list and a Costco list in the shared notes app. And we talk to the lady in the cylinder or the gentleman in the cylinder and say, hey, will you add such and such to this list? And what we realized was that anytime I added things to the list, it would get on the list. Anytime Tiff added something to the list. It went on her copy of the list, but not mine. And so she wondered why I was passive-aggressively not buying things at the grocery store. And as it turns out, it was the lady in the canister, not completing the sync. It was iCloud Sync not working. And the marital strife that was, we ended up having to delete the list in its entirety, and start a new list.
Tom,
just to
this
make that
is
work.
terrifying. This is the beginning of the AI revolution.
This is it.
I agreed.
The lady in the cylinder is starting,
Yep.
You and your wife are getting snippy.
That's right.
Why?
Yeah, I was going to say, the robots can come for us in many different ways.
Yeah.
Just saying.
Right.
It's why I'm always nice to the robots, though.
Right, yeah.
I mean, but
Voice will
still.
say please.
So no, Terminator was one story, but actually, they come to your grocery list.
Shopping list. Yeah.
I was going to say, there are often times where I say that this is the dumbest possible timeline, and I feel like that's the dumbest possible apocalypse, which means absolutely that will happen. But, well, I was going to say, I think we're at about time here. I do want to ask one quick question, as befits the end of something. What's something you're excited about? It doesn't have to be tech. It doesn't have to be Apple-facing. I want us to leave on an up note, and so I want folks to tell me something they're excited about. And I'll start from the inside and work my way out. Stephen, what are you excited about right now?
Oof. This winter's felt really grey and really long and really miserable, and I've never been happier to have spring and sort of sunshine and stuff, just generally. This summer I'm going on a great big road trip in my tiny comedy French car. So I'm taking the family with me, my wife, my son Rufus. We'll be driving a teeny tiny car all the way to Slovenia and hopefully back. And so it'll be fine. And it's going to be awesome. Basically, it's the Citroen 2CV, and there's a big 2CV event every 2 years somewhere in Europe, and we all drive the tiny cars very slowly, and annoying Germans on autobahns to get there. And so really looking forward to that, seeing my friends, hanging out in the field, drinking beer, and having good times.
I love that. Ulrich, how about you?
Well, I guess it'll have to be that I'm at 50% of my life in 2 weeks exactly. That assuming I go to 100, of course. But, yeah.
Congratulations, that's exciting.
So when I arrive tomorrow evening, I got to start planning that.
All right, that's spectacular. Becca, how about you?
It sounds cheesy, but I'm excited about the future of the Mac Admins Foundation. I really, really am. It just makes me happy every time I do anything with it, and I'm super duper excited about the future and all the things that are coming and all of the ways that we're going to be helping future Mac admins.
Graham?
I'm excited about going on holiday in a few weeks where there'll be no phone signal, and I'm not taking any devices with me.
Where are you going that has no phone signal?
Oh, we're going out to Tahoe to go to the lakes in Northern California. But
Fantastic. That's great. Jack?
I'd say I'm a musician and I've always been in a band. But this year I'm looking forward. So I'm actually doing a solo album. So I'm looking forward to going alone and just releasing music as me as Jack. So that's what I'm excited about this year.
That's fantastic. He'll have CDs for us next year. At Mac Admins.
I've actually got some T-shirts with me, so if you want to
Yeah, I was going to say fantastic. Well, I mean, I take it back. Everybody should be on vinyl these days. I was
Oh,
gonna
of
say,
course.
That is what we see in the merch stands at the venues that I work at now. Is that
We're
mostly
expecting
selling
iPod
vinyl.
shuffles with the entire album on it.
Yes, I love that. I think that's spectacular. Thank you, everybody. Let's please give a huge round of applause for our incredible panel tonight.
Thank you.
And I think it is time for the reception out in the Work Brew area out there. We want to say a huge thanks to our friends from Work Brew, who I believe have happy hour all ready for us. So thanks, everybody. We'll see you next time.